Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Carlo. Today we are honored to have Justin Jacobson from Restoration Game to join us. Restoration Game have published several popular titles including Fireball Island, the upcoming Return to Dark Tower, and also by the time you have watched this video, the Chinese versions of Unmatched should be in the pre-order process. Justin, do you want to say hi to the Chinese audience?
Hello. Nice to speak with you today, Carlo. I appreciate you having me on.
Okay. So let's begin with how you started restoration games. It's always been a fascinating story to me.
Yeah, so I guess the very first thing to know is that I've been a gamer my whole life.
Mhm.
I was playing games when I was a kid, and I'm not just the regular, Monopoly and all that, although we did play some of that, but my dad and my uncle were really into games too at that time. So even like
Nice.
the very first Euro games, old war games, role-playing games, the first, editions of like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff. So I was sort of steeped in that as a kid. Growing up, we played all sorts of games, and so I've always been a gamer. And then I actually went to law school and became a lawyer and practiced
Hmm.
law for 20 years.
Wow.
And during that time, I would sort of help people out in the game industry as a lawyer.
Hmm.
Um, so one of the things I used to do is I would go to Gen Con every year and host a seminar where people could come and ask legal questions. And it was really just a way for me to write off the trip as a business expense.
Nice.
And but one year after one of my seminars, a woman came up to me and asked if she said her husband was getting ready to leave Hasbro, and they wanted to take me to dinner and ask me some questions. That was Rob Davio's wife, Lindsay, who's also on the restoration team. And so we just had a nice dinner, and ever sort of since then, he was getting ready to leave. He had just done Risk Legacy, and he
Hmm.
was asking about what he could do with Legacy after he left Hasbro and that sort of thing. And basically, ever since then, I had kept in touch with him. I would review contracts for him and help him with some of his legal issues. And so I sort of always kept in touch with him. Then, if we jump ahead to Dungeons and Dragons during third edition, the D20 license
Hmm.
was a lot of self publishing, and I had always enjoyed Dungeons and Dragons. I was playing a lot at that time. So I started a little company, just myself, where I was self publishing supplements for Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
And then this was right when Kickstarter was just coming
Oh.
around. And I had this idea in my head one day in the shower. So
That
someone had been
always.
talking about how, yeah, I always do my best thinking in the shower. Someone was talking about how one of their Grail games, like the game that they always wanted,
Hmm.
was Star Wars Queen's Gambit, which is a game from early 2000s. Before that, actually, I can't remember the year of that game. Anyway, Rob actually worked on that game,
Hmm.
and it occurred to me that with Kickstarter, so with Dungeons and Dragons supplement, it's just a book or a PDF. You could do that easily. But board games are a lot more of an investment in manufacturing, with between if there's miniatures or a lot more of an investment. So that's harder to do with self-publishing. But with Kickstarter coming in, it was something that you could actually do sort of on your own. And I had this idea of bringing back Star Wars Queen's Gambit without the Star Wars license, just
Of
do it
course.
as something
Hmm.
else, generic fantasy or generic science fiction, something like that. And I just started talking to Rob about it. And he said, well, we can't, I would say, like, is this something you think we could do maybe? And, would you be interested in working on it, basically? And he said he didn't really want to work on that game. Like, that was had some issues with it. But we started talking about all the games that we played when we were kids. Rob and I are like a month apart in terms of how old we are.
Oh.
And so we started going back and forth about the games that we liked, and a lot of games that had some really neat things about them back from the 1970s, 1980s, 90s that aren't in games even today, and how it would be cool to bring those back with some, fix them
Hmm.
up a little bit because they're, with some modern gaming ideas, game design, and bring those back for today's gamer. And that was sort of how the idea got formed. And then we kept talking. We came up with a few titles, a few ideas for some titles. We started asking people, taking surveys on games they'd like to have brought back, things like that. And then I finally just made Rob an offer he couldn't refuse.
Nice.
I told him I'd take care of the business stuff and he could focus on the design stuff. And sort of the rest is history. We started out with 3 games. We had brought on Jason Taylor to help us with graphic design. And then over the past few years, we've added a few more people. We're now up to a team of 8, I think, if I'm counting correctly. So that's how it happened. I just got sick of being a lawyer, basically. I was so burnt out practicing law. It had changed quite a bit since I started, and it was really just wearing on me. And I sold the practice and took the chance on restoration games. Yeah.
Like I imagine your lawyer's license will still be practical for what you're doing right now, especially when it comes to old games license or even IP games, since Unmatched has a bunch of different IPs involving it.
Yeah, I didn't work specifically in intellectual property law. I did mostly litigation, suing people who owed money. But because I was always helping people out with games, these issues were coming up. And so I was educating myself. And as a lawyer, I was able to sort of understand some of those issues better than a non-lawyer might just reading the same stuff. So I was a self-educated intellectual property attorney. But yeah, it does help out quite a bit, especially for the kinds of stuff we're doing where we're taking old games and bringing them back. Who has the rights? What kind of issues are there with the names or with the designs or the art, things like that. And so, yeah, that is definitely something that helps me out. It's kind of a joke around the team that it's good to have a lawyer, who's on the company, so we don't have to hire a lawyer to do this stuff for us.
Nice. Okay, let's talk about Unmatched for a bit. I imagine my audience will have some level of knowledge on what the game is, but say for the sake of the people who somehow found this video without knowing the game, do you want to give a brief introduction to the games and what it's about?
Yeah, so Unmatched is based off of, like all our games, an older game. This one's from 2002 called Star Wars Epic Duels. And it was a game that Rob worked on at Hasbro with Craig Van Ness. And they sort of had gotten Hasbro had gotten this Star Wars license, and they came and they said, look, we need to do a fighting game, and we need it like in 2 weeks or something. It was some crazy deadline they had to work under. And they just came up with something really quick. Mostly it worked pretty well. I know they were just throwing stuff together and all that, but they're 2 of the best designers ever to work in the business. So if you're going to do it, that's who you want to do it. And it was a neat game. And the thing that people really liked about it, that had all the Star Wars characters in it from all the movies and all sorts of stuff, was that you could pick any 2 of the fighters and fight them against each other. So obviously in the movies, you would never see like Han Solo fighting Luke Skywalker, but if you wanted to do that in the game, you could, right? So that was the sort of the part that was pretty cool. Now, when we were deciding to remake it, we said, look, we can't get the Star Wars license for this. So let's play up the fact that you can mix and match, and let's pick all different kinds of heroes and say you can take any 2 heroes and match them together. And that was sort of really the one big change. There were a couple of little changes with the action system, but the one big change was to the boards and the movement system. So in the original, you rolled a die to see how far you could move. And the boards were just regular grids, like, squares. And the really weird thing about that is if you were a ranged fighter, if you were on the same row or line, you could shoot them, but if they moved 1 space away, all of a sudden you couldn't see them anymore. It was weird. Yeah. So so it's funny, Sam Healy with the Dice Tower always used to talk about what a great line of sight system Tannhauser had, which is basically, I sort of had that in the back of my head, and I was like, we could try and use that here, and it worked really well. So that was sort of the last piece of the puzzle. And basically you just look at the colors on the spaces you're on. If any of them match, you can see each other. So it's real straightforward and perfect for this type of game. It's a very sort of quick game. It's a quick fighting game with simple rules, but interesting interactions between the fighters. That's what we really wanted to do. because each deck is its own, each hero has their own custom deck. You're not building a deck from a group of cards, like you might do in Magic or whatever. It's each hero has their own custom deck. We can design that deck to be exactly like that hero and play like that hero. And so that really gives us a lot of freedom to design those decks. And that's sort of the fun part of it. So now we obviously, you can see, thank you for putting those on display there, lots of sets, all different heroes. And it's been very popular, so we got a lot more coming out. And the great thing is you can totally have these weird matchups like Bruce Lee versus Dracula or whatever, right? So it's a lot of fun. And I have to say, it's a lot of fun to work on too.
Cool. So one of the most captivating part of the game is its artwork, and I noticed there have been several different artists who have worked on this game, and even though each of them bringing a different style, we can still see that overall it's the Unmatched game. Is this something difficult to achieve?
It can be. I mean, we co-publish with Mondo Games, and they obviously, so they do a lot of like movie posters and art prints and record labels and things, record albums and things like that. So they have a great sort of a group of artists that they work with, and sort of the style that we wanted was that they were going to look like movie posters. So we sort of have a saying that every card is a poster and every deck is a gallery. So that basically, whereas in a regular card game, you might say, okay, look, just, represent what's actually happening in the card and just make it look like, if it's a punch, make it look like a punch. If it's flying, make it look like it's flying. For us, we wanted really talented artists, and we also wanted to be artistic. And you're right, that can be difficult. We have great art directors, Jason Taylor, Lindsay, and then Mondo. We've worked with some people too over there to help the artists and sort of guide them, just give them a sort of a general idea about what it should look like, but then let them be the artists, right? We get these great artists, so we want to set them free, right? Don't put handcuffs on them. And so that's really the most important thing. Now, one other little thing we do is we do have some common cards. So like Faint is a common card for a lot of decks, use that card, or Regroup, and there's a few other ones. And what we try and do for those is have a theme for that specific card, and then the artist can reinterpret it, but sort of like, so for example, Regroup is the hero gathering their energy, and it's usually them kneeling on the ground or resting on the ground in some way. And so we can give them direction for some of those common cards if they appear in the decks, so that they all sort of have a similar theme, even though a different artist is doing it. That's the other important thing.
And well, since we are talking about art, there was some details I really enjoy in each of those decks. For example, Little Red Riding Hood versus Beowulf, since they are both characters from a storybook on their health die. When they lose all the health, it actually says the end instead of zero.
Yeah.
And something similar is going on with Willow, where her health die is a candle. As her health decreases, it will get dimmer and dimmer until it completely goes out. I really like that kind of detail.
Yeah, that's all Jason Taylor, I think. I think he's the one who's done all of them. So he's sort of, that's something he always thinks about, if there's something special he can do with that. So for example, we just announced a Deadpool solo pack.
Of course.
That was on April Fool's Day we announced, but it's actually true, it's happening. And he did something special on that one too. And there's a couple other ones coming up where he's done some stuff. So yeah, if we could find a cool way to do it, it's just something fun we like to do. And also the other thing that sort of is one of the ways that we sort of become very expressive with the art is in the card backs also. So we want to try and within a set sort of thematically link them, but then also let each character be expressive. So in Little Red versus Beowulf, they're like the books of a cover, like a storybook cover.
Oh, right.
And then for Cobble and Fog, they're all doors with like, door handles on them of like, you're going to that person's place, what would it look like? So that's also something we try and play around with. And again, Jason's doing most of that work too.
I think my favorite card back is the Sherlock one where the 221B sign is in
Sure.
the middle of the door.
Yeah.
But since we talk about Deadpool, how did you get the idea of getting Deadpool into the system? Because he's not one of the 12 originally announced characters for Marvel.
Which one was?
Deadpool.
Oh yeah. So so when we got the rights to work on Marvel for the set, we have basically had a huge list of characters we could pick from. Like they said, here's pick from these characters, right?
Nice.
And there were some that were off limits because there's some that they're sort of planning on doing stuff with as far as movies and shows and stuff that they wanted to wait before they had games ready to do. But so we came out with this sort of list of ideas. There were some that we had to make a decision on, but we just had we built out some sets that we thought made some sense and would be cool. And I think Deadpool was not on the list. Like we were not originally allowed to do Deadpool, but we joked about like a Deadpool deck. And for whatever reason, it sort of stuck in my head. I just thought it was funny. I was like, what would a Deadpool deck look like? Like, what would that even be?
Yeah.
And it just had this idea that he would be annoyed that we didn't pick him to have a set. So he would make his own set.
Of course you will.
And I started a spreadsheet. We have like a spreadsheets where we build out the decks. And I started one for Deadpool. And I just started typing in like he would probably grab other people's cards and just write on them and stuff like that. And we just started listing out, or maybe it's like, his frequent burrito club card or his, Metro Pass, things like that. Just anything that could be a card that he had on hand. And we started building out. I told Rob, I said, hey, I'm just doing this. I know it's for fun. We can't do it. We don't have the rights to do this, but it's just sort of fun. And then Rob and I built out a whole bunch of this. And then we took it back to the team and said, hey, we did this sort of for kicks, but if you want to look at it, we sort of made a Deadpool deck. And people would start adding some other suggestions in, and we started adding cards. And Tim Weish, who is the head of licensing over at Mondo and has a good relationship with Marvel, basically said, look, let's just see if they'll go for it, right? And I guess there's someone in Marvel who's a big fan of Unmatched also, and I guess he was so smitten with the idea too that like we were, that he said, yeah, let's just make this happen. But we were trying to make this date for like April Fool's Day, so we wanted to make it really quickly. So we literally play tested in-house for like a week or 2 weeks, while meanwhile Jason is like starting to work on box cover and card backs and things. And because we were trying to do it quickly, we couldn't get an outside illustrator to do regular art, but that fit in with the idea of him making his own cards. So Jason just did it all with like graphic design. He took existing art from Marvel's database. So he would like go into the database and look at all the existing Deadpool art and like put stuff on that made sense. So for example, I think we've revealed this one. I hope we did. There's a Gaze of Stone card in Deadpool's deck.
Yes.
And it has an actual illustration from some Deadpool comic where he beat Medusa and was carrying her head around. I didn't remember that, but it's in there. So now it's on a card. So it was just a lot of fun, getting that. And then we did it literally within less than a month. I think it was done from basically concept to finish. And yeah, it was a lot of fun to work on. That's the only way something like that could get done, if everybody was excited about it.
And each of the cards it actually has a different artwork and ability as well. That's something impressive.
Yeah, it's sort of befitting his personality, right? Where every card is unique in his deck. So.
Well, since we're talking about future expansion, I want to say right now for the existing hero, we have Bruce Lee, who's a Chinese American, and we have seen Bad Goose from Arabian Nights. Those two seem to be the only two characters who are currently from a Eastern culture, and both of them were released back in 2019. So, is there any plan in the future to include more Asian origin characters?
Yeah, very much so. So we started with Battle of Legends Volume 1, and we wanted to make that sort of as diverse as possible. It's only 4 heroes, but so in terms of gender and nationality and ethnicity and culture and things like that. So Unmatched, we think diversity is important when we're making games in general, but then also for a game like Unmatched, it's even more important because you want all these diverse heroes which makes it more fun to mix and match them, and more interesting. So Cobble and Fog was sort of our third set, which is all based on this Victorian literature. So it's all very England, European, Western European type stuff. And then we have the licensed sets, which we don't have a lot of control over. But for the unlicensed sets, that is something we're very much mindful of. So one of the things we started working on right away was we knew when we had one called Battle of Legends Volume 1 that we would have to at some point have a Volume 2.
Naturally.
And when we started working on that one, we said, hey, let's make sure we continue to show heroes from different cultures and things like that. And then shortly after that, we also early last year or year before that, time during virus is hard to keep track of. We had this contest, a deck design contest. And we basically said, oh, if you were, a lot of people were designing fan decks anyway. So we said, hey, let's, we'll pick the best decks, we'll put them in a set, and we'll pay the designers, and it'll be fun. We'll probably get a few decent decks. Well, we got a huge response. We had literally hundreds and hundreds of decks were submitted.
I was
and a lot of oh really? That's cool. What did you submit?
Well, I didn't get picked. Both of my characters are from some Chinese origin.
One of them is Lü Bu from Three Kingdoms, and the other would be a husband and wife monster couples from Journey to the West, who are the frenemy of Sun Wukong the Monkey King.
Okay.
Yeah, Sun Wukong happens to be one of the most submitted characters in that country.
Right. Yeah. So we got a bunch of responses from people all over the world, which was great. And a lot of the decks, most of the decks we got were really well designed. So instead of picking 4, we ended up picking 12.
Oh, nice.
And then we started putting them in sets. And so we've got sets planned out, like the next 5 sets planned out over the next 2-3 years, including a Battle Legends Volume 3.
Nice.
And then we haven't announced those yet. And we're not doing that specifically because when we make the announcement, we want each of them to get their time in the spotlight because the people who submitted put a lot of effort into it. So all I will say is I can't announce specific heroes, but I can say yes. That's something we're actively working on. Over the next several sets, we have multiple heroes from non-Western European cultures and countries, including Southeast Asia. Africa, we have an African hero from Burkina Faso, Yanenga in Battle Legends Volume 2 coming up. And we are looking at other cultures as well as we continue to build out sets. We've got a hero from a Hispanic culture, a Latin culture, I guess you would say. I'm trying to be vague because I don't want to give away too many hints.
Yeah, understandable.
But yeah, it's something, like I said, it's something we believe in is important in general. And also we think it makes Unmatched a better game.
Oh, that's exciting to hear. Well, since we have some time, so let's talk about, say, when you're licensing your game to different companies to do a localization. Is there any difficulty when you're doing that, especially doing some license work with IP? Because for now, as far as I'm aware of, the Unmatched in Chinese only has the unlicensed heroes available.
Right. So when I said we published with Mondo as our publishing partner on Unmatched, we handle the unlicensed sets and Mondo handles the licensed sets. And so they go out and get these licenses. And generally speaking, they're only going to get these English rights. So they don't actually have the rights. Now, one of the things that happened since we started this is that Unmatched has begun to take off in other countries and other languages. So far, it seems like it's been successful and is translating well into other languages. And so one of the things Mondo is doing, is my understanding, I'm not part of this process, is sort of looking into the possibility of at least some of these licensed sets making it into other languages. But right now, when they get them, they don't, because to do that, you would have to get those rights up front and would cost a lot more and things like that. And so, yeah, they just don't have the right to do it right now. But it's something they're looking at. It's something we're, aware of.
That's cool. So I So when we are doing localizations, um, is is there anyone from restorations and game side to do a final check on how the quality of the localization is?
So we have another partner that we work with for the localized sets is Yellow, company in France.
Yellow,
so what we did is we made an arrangement with them because they're a much bigger company. They do lots of games worldwide, lots of different languages, lots of working with many other partners. And so basically we said, look, we'll focus on what we know how to do is the English version of that, and then we'll let you handle all the other stuff. So Yellow then turns around and works with other local publishers, and to sort of make the other sets, and then they do a final check when they get localized. They will come back to us if they see something in whatever one of our publishing partners is doing and say, are you okay with this thing? And usually it's fine. It's like for example, they might show us how they're moving the logo around on the box cover, that kind of thing.
Okay.
It's usually slight differences, but they sort of oversee that process, and they're pretty good about it. They've been doing it a while, so.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, I guess that's all of my questions for now. So, is there anything you want to talk about before we go?
I'm excited to be on. I'm always excited to see when our games or people sort of outside of my little area are interested in our games. And I know, so we are obviously working on Return to Dark Tower. We had a big Kickstarter for that last year. We're getting ready to sort of get that all done. And I know some of that, there's definitely some people over in China, among other places, that are we'll have some of those, and then we're talking to people to see if we can even do some localized versions of that as well.
Oh, nice.
So that's what we're working on right now. And if I guess the last thing I would say is I'm on Twitter. I think you found it. So at Restoration Game. If anybody has questions or they want to ask me something or see something, you can always reach out to me there.
Cool. Okay, thanks for joining us today. Well, I will look forward for the next match set whenever it comes.
Soon. All righty.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carla.